Welcome everyone to CGHE seminar stroke webinar number 338. And we have Baohua. Baohua, are you with us today? And we will soon hear from her and I will introduce her properly, but let me take you through the webinar protocols. And let me say, just before I do that, thanks very much to Farhan Ali, who's filled in for our CG webinar broker, our communications officer, Mary Bowen Perkins, who has gone down with COVID and is only just back at work today. So thanks, Farhan, for doing such a great job with our webinars in Mary's absence. But let me now at this point introduce our speaker for today. The topic is international education in Hong Kong, paradoxes in intercultural communication, adaptation and acculturation strategies, very important aspect of international education, which many of us are interested in. And our presenter is Yu Baohua, and she's, I think, recently arrived at Lingnan University. She's an associate professor at the School of Graduate Studies and the Institute of Policy Studies of Lingnan in Hong Kong. Her research focuses on intercultural communication competence, second language acquisition, and cross-cultural psychology of international students. And she's also interested in technology-enhanced learning and digital storytelling. And she's well published. I think I've seen her name as an editor of higher education before today, and she's published in Journal Studies in International Education, Studies in Higher Education. She's an accomplished scholar. What you might say is a fully emerged scholar with a publication list of standing, and she will bring a lot to us today. So at this stage, let me hand over to you, Baohua, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Majid Singh, for your nice words and nice introduction. Let me share my screen. So can you see my screen?
We can. It's all there in full.
Okay. All right. So good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I think most audience are either from UK or Hong Kong or mainland China. So today I'm going to present a paper entitled International Education in Hong Kong, Paradoxes in Intercultural Communication, Adaptation, and Acculturation Strategies. This paper is co-authored with Dr. Yuan Wright. I am Baohua Yu, as introduced by Professor Majid Singh. So I'm from the Lingnan University in Hong Kong. So in this webinar, I'm going to cover 7 aspects as usual. A paper will include, such as the background, the rationale, the research gap, theoretical basis, and I will introduce how I did it, and the major research findings and the implications of this paper, of this research. Let me first show you the international students' mobility. As you can see, in 2011, there are 4 million students studying abroad, and then it kept increasing until 2020. We have 6.4 million students studying abroad. So if we compare these two numbers, it's almost 1.6 times of the figure in 2011. Actually, in about 20 years ago, that's 2000, I didn't show the figure here. Actually, this figure have tripled the figure of 20 years ago, which means the demand for overseas study in higher education or overseas study actually is all the time on the rising tendency. So if we take a look of those international students' mobility over the 20 years from 2000 and 2020, as you can see, several major destinations claimed substantial share of the world international higher education students in 2020. As you can see, these countries listed here. This is the situation, the the status of 2020. But if we compare this with the figures or the share in 2000, we can see the big difference. The big difference is in 2000, you cannot find China and Russia. So, and another feature of this is the share from US is decreasing because the share have been shared by another two countries, which have showed the increasing competitive or attracting destination for international students. There are Canada and China. And if we can compare the percentage between 2010 and 2020, we can see the figure for both countries almost doubled. So all this, in short, the demand for study abroad remains very strong. You may ask, what about the impact of COVID-19 on the global students' mobility? So research have shown there are several factors which can help students to decide their study destination. There are vaccine availability, open borders, and in-person instruction stand to gain the competitive share of the global market going forward. Since this research is conducted in Hong Kong, so let me show you the figures of, we actually call non-local students because as you can see, a majority of these non-local students are from mainland China. So the real international students are those students from other places in Asia and the rest of the world. So if you see the figure, we can see the whole total number of international or non-local students are on the steady increase from over the last maybe decade. But at here, I just show 10 years figure. And one feature is the mainland students remains as the majority over the 10 years. And the students from other places in Asia shows a very steady increase, okay? And comparatively speaking, the students from the rest of the world shows slight increase. So because the real international students in Hong Kong are underrepresented, so maybe we need more research or insight into how they adapt to the life and the study in Hong Kong. So there's a qualitative change. Qualitative changes of international students' mobility are characterized by rising competition between traditional. Traditional means the Western, the major Western countries, as I've shown you in the previous chart, and emergent higher education destination such as Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Singapore. So of course, we have some researchers or scholars who've done some research to figure out the reasons for the global landscape change. So Young found in Asia, there are three major reasons for those international students to reconsider study in the West. One is COVID-19 pandemic. The other is geopolitical conflicts. And the third one is concerns over racism or discrimination. As we we may have known that Hong Kong becomes a popular study destination for especially for mainland students. So the reason for this is mainly because a rise in global standing of Asian universities, because almost all the universities in Hong Kong, they have shown a very good performance in the university ranking. And also the geopolitical ties in the post-colonial era, creating new networks for international students' mobility. And another reason pointed out by Professor Mark and his colleagues is because of the proximity to home and perceived safety, especially during the COVID-19. So let me also introduce a little bit about the Hong Kong higher education. Hong Kong actually is an emerging regional educational hub, has attracted a growing number of international or non-local students over the years. I think this has a very close relationship with the Hong Kong government's positioning or vision. They hope that Hong Kong higher education or Hong Kong can be an educational hub. And the very important strategy is to recruit non-local students and as a very critical ingredient in their strategical plan. So under one country, two system constitutional framework, Hong Kong provides a unique context for higher education mobility. On one hand, the education system of Hong Kong combines Western and Chinese elements. What do I mean? Because we have international staff, so we have internationalized curriculum, and also most of the program were delivered in English. The assessment is in Westernized style. And Chinese elements, of course, some courses can be delivered in Chinese, and the traditional Chinese culture and also Chinese heritage will be introduced for the students who are interested in them. And of course, we have a very considerable proportion of staff coming from either Hong Kong or mainland China or Taiwan or Singapore or Malaysia. So we have many people or Chinese heritage or Chinese background scholar in the education system. On the other hand, it gives rise to diverse linguistics in Hong Kong, the three major languages. So the most popular, of course, English, and the second popular, I think the most popular can be English and Cantonese, and Putonghua is now also very popular. And demographic, we have a different ethnicity in Hong Kong and sociocultural environment. So that actually makes Hong Kong a quite very special place, which embrace the feature of the West and the East. So now in such a place, how will those international students feel about their study? That's very interesting. So also, I want to introduce a little bit of the development of higher education in Hong Kong. Higher education in Hong Kong expanded in early 1990s. Now, by 2020, we can the 8 UGC-funded university can hold 100,000 student places. And as I have mentioned, many universities, they have achieved world-class standard according to the university ranking. They have different system. Especially, I want to mention the University of Hong Kong, the Hong Kong University of Science Technology, and the Chinese University of Hong Kong. They stand as the top 100 university in the world. And on top of this university, we have other universities such as the City, University of Hong Kong, Polytech University of Hong Kong, including Lingnan University and the Education University of Hong Kong, Baptist University of Hong Kong. They also have different strengths in different discipline, or some discipline actually stand out as world class as well. And also another feature, all the courses were delivered in English. And this is another document published by UGC in 2004, Hong Kong Higher Education to make a difference, to move with the times. With this policy, we have a series of initiatives. First, double the non-local student quota to 20%. Now we have achieved it. And to remove the restrictions of non-local students for postgraduate students. Now the quota, we have more and more quotas to recruit non-local students for postgraduate programs. And we offer scholarship schemes to attract talented non-local students. For example, almost all the postgraduate PhD program are funded by either UGC or by the university. So, so if you want to study a PhD in Hong Kong, normally you can be financed. You can receive financial support, and the scholarship is quite attracting. And recent 10 years, we also offer the fellowship, research fellowship to the very outstanding applicants, and that attract more international students into Hong Kong. And the next one is rights for graduate to seek employment after graduation. The most recent policy is upon graduate from Hong Kong, either for bachelor or master. So all the students are automatically, they have a 2-year E-on visa. So within this visa, they can either look for job or work in Hong Kong. By the end of the 2 year, if they also have another eligible or valid visa, and their visa will be renewed for another 2 years. So if they accumulate 7 years, and they can apply for permanent resident of Hong Kong. So I think that's another attracting point for Hong Kong higher education. Yeah. So as I've said, the percentage for the non-local students increased from 2% to 20%. And among this 20%, majority are from mainland, 23% are from Asia, and 4% are from other continents. So as with the change of global landscape of international student mobility, I think it is very obvious that the international students study on international students has become a present policy concern for the government, and now also for the policy makers, such as university senior management and researchers. However, not much work has been done on the international students in Hong Kong, including my previous work. I'm mainly about the mainland students in Hong Kong. So there is a growing need to better understand experiences of international students in East Asia, and also including other places as well. We actually want to propose a good model, a model that can link the intercultural communication, adaptation, and acculturation together. And we hope this model can have very significant implications for those East Asian countries in terms of how to cater for the needs of those international students. So yes, I've done a lot of work on international students, but international students mainly in Australia, or international students in mainland China. So I've also done some research in Hong Kong, but not much work have been studied those real international students. So this work, I want to bridge all those previous work based on the previous work and propose the case that paradoxes between the international students into the atom for engaging with students from different backgrounds, but on the other hand, a lack of interaction or friendship with local students. I think this is a very common phenomena for all the international students in the world. So the other one is we further discuss the reasons for this paradox, the strategies students can adopt in response, and the implications for their academic, social, cultural, and the psychological adaptation. So the theoretical basis for this research is situated within 2 fields. One is cross-cultural psychology. So they mainly talk about social, cultural, and the psychological adaptation and the acculturation strategy. And I just, in my previous work, I found academic adaptation is another key factor which should be included into cross-cultural psychology or cross-cultural adaptation. Well, in this social psychology of language, they propose the second language acquisition is really important because it produces and strengthening intercultural communication. And the willingness to communicate model is often employed as a measure of language use in the context of intercultural interaction. But look at Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, it's a bilingual context. International students are caught up in a situation where the social historical factors means the language of university teaching is English and the daily communication language is mainly Cantonese. So this is very particular for those international students. How can they communicate with local students? So in order to bridge this theoretical gap, so I present a interactive and responsive model that link acculturation, all those three important factors I mentioned in my topic. So here are the research objectives. So I want to explore the interdynamics among intercultural communication, adaptation, acculturation strategies. And we want to consider the differences in how and why international students across different cultural backgrounds, they communicate, acculturate when two or more cultures comes into contact. And lastly, we want to examine whether different L2 willingness to communicate and acculturation strategy will lead to different adaptation outcomes. So basically, we use semi-structured interview. Each interview lasted for 40 to 60 minutes. And we employed 24 international students at a world-class university in Hong Kong. So among these 24, we have 11 females and 13 males, and 11 undergraduate, 12 undergraduate and 12 postgraduate, 14 Asian countries and 10 Western country students. We try to balance in terms of gender, in terms of level of study, and also Western and Asian countries. So when we got the data, we employed a three-step process for semantic analysis. First, we employed line-to-line, open, and axial coding of data into emergent themes. And step two, we construct a coding theme to identify the core relationships. And step three, we draw conclusions from interview data. So based on these three themes emerged, I will elaborate one by one. So the first theme is about the barrier to interaction and friendship with local students. So actually, under the first theme, the first very important sub-theme is perceived cultural differences. Many international students report that they cannot make friends with local students because they feel local students are not so open or they're a bit conservative. And actually, we found a very interesting phenomena. For international students, they reported a very low motivation to learn Cantonese because for them, there's no use because they can speak English. They don't feel they have a need or motivation to learn Cantonese. Well, they report, or in their eyes, they feel the Hong Kong students, they showed very low confidence in speaking English. So this is the paradox which we call, and this actually makes the language as an explanation factor for the lack of interaction and friendship between the local and the international students. And because of this, they feel they are outsider in an internationalized university because that's world class. So of course, the performance is very good in terms of international staff, international campus. However, they still feel they are outsider. Quite a few of them express the same feeling. In terms of acculturation strategies, they identify more with either their own, the co-national students or other international students. This is very interesting They specifically, the participants described that friendship groups were typically based on shared nationality, language, religion, or ethnicity. So, and also participants from countries underrepresented at the university most often discuss not being part of close-knit student community. Instead, those international students form a university social group at the university based upon shared Western identity. Actually, the underrepresented could be students from UK or US. Maybe because most of the US students, they are on exchange program, just stay there for only 1 semester. There's very, very little student from US, they register or they enroll the 4-year bachelor or 5-year bachelor. So they feel they are be outside, they're excluded. So in terms of the 3 aspect of adaptation, we can find in terms of academic adaptation, students from Asian countries, they found it's difficult to adapt to the English media of instruction in the university. While students from Western country or the English-speaking countries, students reported challenging in adapting to the unfamiliar educational approaches or styles, such as the teacher-centered teaching, unlimited classroom discussion, etc., etc. So in terms of a social culture adaptation, the participants typically discuss more difficulty with fitting because they found difficult to fit in the new environment, and that makes them feel they're outsider of the university and the society. And they reported their activity were mainly, or they were mainly, I mean, they have very little contact with the outside society. So because of this, because of they don't have, some of them don't feel they don't have a community or they don't have friendship with the local. So some of them report feeling of homesickness and loneliness. So I want to discuss, I want to say there's an invisible wall separating international students from local. So I think one is the language awareness and also the perceived cultural differences. So if the international students, they are willing to study Cantonese, or if local students are more willing, are more open to initiate conversation with international students, so the situation could be much more different. Well, the acculturation strategy identification with co-national and other international students, this is very particular in Hong Kong because previous research always found international students identify more with co-national. That is very consistent in previous research. In terms of social culture adaptation, I think it stands out more than the academic adaptation because there's a lack of the resources, such as how the newcomer cope with the fitting. And all these issues should be better acquired or prepared for those international students. And therefore, I propose a framework. Hopefully, because I found international communication and cross-cultural adaptation are closely related. And also an effective acculturation strategy is another crucial factor determining the success of intercultural communication and cross-cultural adaptation. So this is a framework which depicts the dynamics of interactive and responsive relationship among transnational communication, acculturation, adaptation. So this framework actually proposed that a higher level of willingness to communicate, which consists of a high communication competence and a high linguistic confidence and a low language anxiety can contribute to predict cross-cultural adaptation, the three aspects. So a very good cross-cultural adaptation can make the international students have better acculturation strategy. They can identify with co-host. They can also identify with the locals as well. And in another way, this integration acculturation strategy can help the better willingness to communicate, and they're in a very good circle. So for future study, we propose that study can explore the nuance of the multidimensional cross-cultural adaptation issue, and to test interrelation. I mean, actually, the intercultural communication adaptation, which one stand out? And students from different cultural background, they may have different adaptation problems. So we also need to learn for certain cultural background students, what are the relationship between the three aspects of the cross-cultural adaptation. In the end, I want to propose some activities that university can do in facilitating communication between local and international students. I think this is a universal problems facing local and international students in the world, not only in Hong Kong. So first of all, a more comprehensive student orientation program aimed at providing newcomers with essential games, knowledge, and context to survive in daily lives. I think in the orientation program, not only for the international, but also for the local, telling them if you want to have more foreign friends, you need to be more open because actually most of the Hong Kong local students, they can speak very good English. Of course they can, but they're because we are Chinese. So I think on the whole, Chinese people are not that open to make friends. So I think on that aspect, in terms of this, the Western student can take the initiative. Of course, during the conversation, the Western or the international students, you can use both English and Cantonese. You can learn from each other. And practical dialogue-oriented Cantonese class for international students. I strongly encourage international students in Hong Kong to join this class. Like me, I've been in Hong Kong for, I think, almost 20 years. I think I can speak Cantonese. That makes my life much easier. And I feel that speaking Cantonese makes me feel I'm part of the community. Sense of belonging. And the third one is culture and the language exchange pairs between local and international students. And the fourth one is to develop the curriculum, which is, this kind of curriculum actually should be more like workshop for all the staff to know that especially those international students, those Western students, students from Western countries, they prefer learner-centered pedagogy, classroom discussion, more assessment as group project. However, I think Chinese students, they prefer student-centered pedagogy. Classroom discussion, I think they prefer as well. And group project, I don't think they prefer that much. Then number 5 is to propose some inclusive student clubs and societies. And the last one is to conduct workshops and seminars on Hong Kong societal issues. I think that will be very interesting to all the international students in Hong Kong. So that's all for my presentation. Here are the references. Thank you.
And thank you, Baohua. That was very interesting indeed and well presented. And I think that many people, almost everyone I know, would agree with you that Hong Kong is a terrific place to study, and a good place to live. It's very exciting environment, and it's full of interesting people. Many of them are visitors or passing through for a year or two or longer as students or others. And it's one of the things that makes Hong Kong so interesting, that sense of mobility and vibrancy around its role as a kind of international passageway. But also everything's done so well. Quality is very high in the universities, and I think everyone understands the reputation that HKU and all the others have, in the global environment. Certainly in East Asia, they continue to attract a great deal of attention from the mainland students of high quality and others, and a significant minority of Westerners coming through as well. Shows, I think, the global reputation of the island. But it's not easy, is it, to manage, Hong Kong higher education right now? It's a difficult geopolitical time. It's not going to get easier in the foreseeable future. Hong Kong is always split in its identity anyway, at any time, always has been. And now, of course, you've got the geopolitical conflict between China and the West becoming sharper again. So, all of us, I think, are uncertain of the future in general, but especially in relation to Hong Kong. So I understand you would see a PRC student coming to Hong Kong as a cross-cultural situation, right? And perhaps not the same as someone coming from France to Hong Kong, but they're both cross-cultural situations, and we can talk about them both. Yeah. Well, I think the position of mainland students is quite difficult. I was in Hong Kong at Lingnan, actually, just finishing up a couple of days of conferencing, and when the 2019 troubles broke out, they weren't primarily at Lingnan, of course, they were at other institutions in Hong Kong, but it was difficult to be a mainland student at that moment. That people from the mainland, I think, felt quite worried about their own position and how they would be seen and by locals and local students too, and so you could see the issues and problems for them. So the mainland students are in great numbers as international students. They're much the biggest component. They're not really international, are they? But they're cross-cultural and they're not local. I mean, do they tend to band together, while they're studying in Hong Kong? Do they tend to associate strongly with each other, form their own community and so on, as is the case in some other countries?
I think it really depends. I found if students, they have previous overseas learning experience, they will be more open to make friends. And if they have a platform to interact with each other, such as they have some social experiential learning experience together to a certain place, or they have to do the classroom projects always several times, and they make friends, and it is possible. But on the whole, I would say it's more like the mainland students that mingle with mainland students, and other international students, even students from Philippines, they can mingle with Indian, other minority students, instead of with the mainland or with the Hong Kong students. So I feel maybe if they share more culture similarities, it's easy for them to communicate. This is very interesting. I think the interesting part for this study is found they can either identify with their co-national or the other international students. So this is quite interesting to me.
The research seems to show that consistently, doesn't it? That very large groups of nationals from outside will tend to hang out with each other. But when you've got smaller groups, like the Filipinos and the Southeast Asians and so on in Hong Kong, then they'll tend to make friends with other international students, not necessarily from their own country. and that can be quite good. And some of those very strong friendships, sometimes that last a long time, get formed in those encounters between international students from different countries. But you've also got this third group, which is the Westerners, and you said on your way through that that there's a tendency for them to band together. I'm really intrigued about the question of the geopolitics here and how that's playing out. The relationship between Western students in Hong Kong and mainland students. What happens there? Are there many instances of friendships being formed, or is there a fairly strong separation there?
When the data was connected, I think the relationship is still good. So people didn't mention too much about the geopolitical conflicts. But I think this is a very interesting topic for me to go on right now and to find some Western students to interview. However, I actually want to share that the political issues may not influence the reviews or experience of international students because like me, working in a university, when we have umbrella movement, when we face those critical moments in Hong Kong, people from outside, they worry too much about our life in Hong Kong. But as insider in Hong Kong, we don't feel we are threatened, or we don't feel much we are in danger every day like that. So and the government, once the government actually is protecting the all the Hong Kong or all the citizens in Hong Kong, I think once just after that period of time, everything just return to the normality, just like the COVID-19. We are trying to adjust into the new conflicts, either within the Hong Kong and also the conflict outside Hong Kong, even the conflict between China and the Western countries. I think here people do not care too much about political conflicts. So it's more like their daily life, their academic life. So that's my observation, but I think it's a very good question and a good moment and a critical moment for me to do more research on that.
Yeah, I don't think people's the effects of geopolitics play out in a direct sense for people. I think they might be lurking away in the background, conditioning the way people see things. But education has such an important role in bringing people together, and creating understanding. So every time there's a friendship, a real friendship, a deeper friendship, not just hi-bye kind of thing, being formed between people from different backgrounds that would otherwise be separated, it's a real gain for everyone, I think. And Hong Kong can provide that, and this sort of tolerant, inclusive atmosphere of high quality academic institutions in Hong Kong is a really good way to bring people together, I think, in a constructive way. I've got one more question before we go to the call list, and it's probably the most important question in some ways. I mean, what's the relationship, do you think, between the level of acculturation and academic performance? To what extent does it really matter in terms of academic outcome? I mean, I know there's issues about personal happiness and so on, which clearly are going to benefit from enculturation, but what about academic performance?
The academic performance is reflected more in academic adaptation. So because academic adaptation means they have a very in-depth or very smooth interaction with staff and the students, and they can achieve very good achievement, and not to mention dropout issue. So as to academic performance and acculturation, because actually, previous research mentioned a lot about acculturation strategy in relation with in relation as the social cultural adaptation and psychological, but we also found that the identification with local can help more with social cultural adaptation, while the identification with the host and also with the local can actually contribute to academic adaptation.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense because you can get more
You can see why.
resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have more collaboration with local and to know how to achieve high. And I think that that's the relationship we always mention, but there's no quantitative research on this. This only qualitative. Do you think this is a very also another interesting topic for the future research, also for me to do I mean to provide empirical data to prove that kind of relationship.
Yeah, because there's a distinction, I think, between entering into the knowledge framework of where you're being educated, understanding the field of knowledge and becoming, taking into your own thinking and then becoming empowered and agentic with that knowledge. That's one thing. And it's another thing to be socially active and socially engaged and effective in cross-cultural relationships in the social environment. They're not quite the same thing. Because academic performance is so important for people, it's interesting to see if there is something going on there. And you would think, I suppose, that when people are comfortable and happy, all else being equal, they might study more effectively and learn more and perform better as well. But on the other hand, if they're thoroughly enculturated in the local environment, they may not have much time for study. So there's also that side of things too. Let's bring our call list in, and the first person I've got on my list is Jianyao Yang. Come in, please.
Hi, thank you for this interesting session. And I just have a question regarding the last bit of your presentation when you said Chinese student doesn't prefer group work that much. Because I did went to study in Denmark for a while, and I noticed that they really value group work and they think group work is the best way to learn. So this caught my attention, and I was just wondering, why do you think it is the reason behind that Chinese students doesn't prefer group work that much? And do you think it is a situation that's worth changing? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I should make it more specific. When I say Chinese people, I mean the Chinese, mainland Chinese students. They do not prefer the group work that much because in their previous education, not much group work, and they are much more independent. But for students in Hong Kong, they actually accustomed to this kind of activity, but still they hate free rider. So because in terms of group work, the workload distribution is another issue for them to solve. So, but I actually mean the Chinese, mainland Chinese students. Do I think it's a situation worth changing? I think the instructors should bear this in mind and then maybe give more instructions and more attentions or more detailed instructions when assign the group work to the students, make it clear to them so that there's no issue or some conflicts will happen between the group work. I think all those Chinese students studying abroad are those elite students. They are very smart, they're quicker in learning. So even they are not, maybe for the first two, they're not so keen on it. But later once they acquire the skills in presentation, I think they won't say, I don't want to do it. They are very good students. But I think instructors should bear that in mind. And there's another issue I want to mention about the group work. When we mix the Asian students with the Western or English-speaking students, and the English-speaking students complained about because they speak English And then all the Asian students will say, okay, you present whenever they ask somebody to be the presenter. So the Western students have to be the presenter, no matter they're ready or they're willing or not. So if we all know this, so when we design this activity, we make it clear, say the presenter can take turn, not just ask them to nominate the presenter.
Yeah, I think this finding about project work has been consistent in other studies as well. My friend and colleague Kazuhiro Kudo in Japan, his own thesis on cross-cultural agency identified this issue in the literature, and it's a consistent pattern. And it's these questions about the division of labor and this feeling of, free riders and passengers, and resentment that two groups form if there are two different nationalities, in the project group, and one tends to do most of the work, and whether they're squeezed out by the others or the others are withdraw, or some of them don't understand, or something goes wrong. And it's difficult to get cross-cultural groups working really well on extended project work. It's really is a test, isn't it, of the cross-cultural classroom. Now our next contributions from Mohammed Rashid, and welcome, and come in, please.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Bahu, for lovely presentation. It's quite interesting. Just I'm wondering, there's my experience has in Australia and Brunei, two countries, and I say that is local students, they have a kind of attitude that international students don't like to interact with them. On the other hand, international students have complained like that local students do not like to interact with them. So they have just two opposite opinion. So my question is regarding your research, that is, what are the factors that are really working behind this sort of rival attitudes between two groups of students? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I would say it's more related to the language, the common language they use, and the cultural understanding of both between the host and the international countries. So, I mean, for international students, I had been the international students in Australia as well. I found for international students, for some, not all of them, some, they need to step out of their comfort room to try to initiate the communication with local. But I think local, as a local, you are the host. You are the host in the host country. So you should exemplify or show your your warmth and your welcome to the international students. So I think in my situation, in the context of Hong Kong, just because a lot of the activity were conducted in Cantonese, and international students felt they were excluded from those activities, even they join and they don't understand and they don't want to learn Cantonese. While for the local, Hong Kong local students, they can speak English, but they will choose their mother tongue to organize, to conduct those activities. And they feel, okay, you come to Hong Kong, you should have this kind of motivation to, maybe this is not their conception, but at least they should find a common language that they can communicate. So that's the most difficult part for the international students and the local students to understand, to communicate, to make friends. And there are also many other reasons, like those international students in other research. I think there might be some other reasons, such as some international students, they are not so confident in their English, or some local students, they are not confident in their English. So if they can all use the English as a mother tongue, then that would be, the friendship can be made. But another one, the friendship, whether it's a superficial friendship or it's a deep friendship. It really depends on the cultural understanding and many other different aspects. Some of my other papers discussed the relation, the friendship between local and the mainland students. We propose a lot of interesting findings, and if you're interested, I can share my research paper with you. Did I answer your question?
And we've suddenly got 3 more, and it's 3 minutes to the hour, so we're not going to be able to deal with these adequately. But if you have a quick look in the chat, Baohua, you'll see that May Moulding has asked whether there's anything that professors can do to create a more inclusive and pluralistic approach. And she says that she can't ask a question on camera because she's on a train, but it might be worth thinking about that question. Then we've got Wanqing Wang has said, my question is whether acculturation is influenced by psychological factors, and for teachers, how to conduct acculturation strategy if they lack psychological knowledge. I mean, does it require specialized knowledge to address these issues? That's an interesting question. And then we've got Fangan Chen asking about, you mentioned some problems the international students would meet in the upward social mobility, such as EMI learning challenges for Asian students or teacher-centered teaching for Western students. The methodology adopted here is really applicable. Would it be conducive or proper to do opposite acculturation research like the college students in HK coming to mainland China to further their study under the policy context like the GBA? So over the water, the Greater Bay Area is humming along at a great rate in Shenzhen and elsewhere. Would it be a good idea to reverse the relationship? And I'm sure other people have thought of this at times. Your final comments, because it will be the last contribution that anyone will make.
Okay, maybe I answer because I just done a research on the last one, the GBA one.
Right.
And so we have a lot of Hong Kong students going to GBA to study, and we found actually they found the most difficult one is academic adaptation, because they found especially the mathematics were taught at a much advanced level than the mathematics they learned in Hong Kong.
And everywhere else,
Yeah. And Hong Kong students enjoying privilege to be recruited by the prestige universities in mainland China. They can choose their favorite subject to learn. I think in terms of and some of them actually identify more with the mainland identity when they study there. In terms of social culture adaptation, not much. In terms of psychological, not much. Academic stood out for those students. But of course, you can do this research in the line of the research I report. So I think of course, we can do a similar one for those students studying in GBA. And I think did I use up the time?
Oh, you can answer the others quickly, and then we'll close.
Okay. Culture is influenced by psychological factors.
Yeah. Is it a specialized knowledge that professors and lecturers need to have to be able to address the acculturation issue?
I think acculturation, of course, is influenced by the psychological factors, such as your ideology, your conception of the host culture, your conception. How did you see what you have experienced there? How did you see, for example, for the same teaching, the Asian students will feel, oh, too much discussion, too much discussion or too student-centered, but the Western students will perceive as still teacher-centered, or I want more discussion, I want more project. So you can see students from different cultural background, they may have different perception towards the same learning environment. The different perception towards this kind of learning environment or experience will definitely decide or contribute or determine their acculturation strategy. So whether they will identify who they should mingle with, to interact with. Well, the other question from Mo-Ling about teacher, how can the professor bring in inclusive to education? Have a different priority. For professors, I felt the professors themselves should have a deep understanding of students. No matter we can divide them as local and international or mainland. So we should have a better knowledge about this. And then when we design the classroom activity, we can do some experiment, but bear in mind that can be very risky if you do it for the first 1 or 2 times, because I try to, for example, I try to divide or try to cluster the local with mainland students. And in the end, they did the project very well. And in the end, the mainland student told me, say, Lucy, I'm sorry. Even we did that, many professors tried to group us together, but we feel we still, we're still 2 groups of students. We can't. This is a universal problem. Sorry, I don't have a very perfect answer to your question, but I think one of the research agenda, a very important agenda for the university, is to develop inclusive and internationalized curriculum, and such as when you recruit students, and also when you group them into the tutorial group, you need to pay attention to the proportion of students from different cultures. And when you recruit students, if we really want to do internationalization teaching or higher education, we need to have a lot of different strategies in recruiting the international students. For example, I saw some programs in Australia. All the program were done over, all the international students are from mainland China. This is absolutely not very good for those students to study. They feel they are studying the curriculum, the program, even though in Australia, but still they talk to their peers from the mainland China. So so how to internationalize the curriculum is a critical issue for all the researchers, all the teachers, professors, and especially the policymakers to consider and to make this happen. I think we need more people to be concerned with this, to concern with this issue and to solve this issue together. Only professor, with the role of the professor, I don't think can solve this this issue by themselves. Okay.
I agree with all that, and I think that I'd add something though. I think the positionality of the professor or the lecturer is called into question with this very simple question. You know, what can we do to make a more pluralistic education possible? So I would say that in addition to all the things that Baohua has said, one size does not fit all. Everyone is different. Appreciating and understanding difference is really is the task here. Respecting everyone, but respecting everyone in their own terms. So getting to understand a different culture, being curious about it, starting to see the world through the eyes of the other. That's really necessary in cross-cultural educational work. You can't simply provide a curriculum to everyone in the same way that it's always been provided and expect that to work, even if, you know, the personal relations are ethical and compassionate. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be a willingness to enter into the cultural imagination of others and to start to compose a world in your own mind, which is more plural, which is multi-centered, where difference and diversity, as well as similarity and commonality, are important. And, you know, it's holding those things all in balance, I think, that makes a good educator. But cross-cultural work is most important. We are to bring people together across international barriers. Cross-cultural work and education, along with perhaps some activities in the economy, are the best way of doing that. And we can do it on the basis of equality, of respect, mutual respect, and a real curiosity and desire to engage with each other. Then we'll make a big contribution to the world. And Hong Kong and Baohua are doing that. And we're really very grateful for you for coming on today. And we hope to hear more about your research in future. And you present so well, and we'd really like you to come back and present again at some point. And we look forward to following what you're doing. Next webinar, which is on Tuesday next week, is back to the humanities, which we just had a series. You thought we'd finished with the humanities for a while, but no. We're going to talk about the PhD, humanities PhD in Denmark, and we've got really outstanding presenters in Soren Bengston, who's one of the leading philosophers of education in the world, and Lynn McAlpine, who moves between Canada and Oxford in the UK, and they've got some very interesting data to share with us on the humanities and the PhD in Denmark and how that's changing. So we'll see you on Tuesday. Once again, Baohua, thank you very much for coming on, and to everyone, bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.